Have you ever had this happen in a session? Oh, sorry, what was that? I just didn't care. Welcome, scholars, storytellers, and fellow babysitter DMs. This is the Level Up Corner, led by yours truly, Wizo, as we delve into all the tips and tricks about Dungeons & Dragons. Today's topic is how to get players to be more engaged. Or, in a question, how do you get players to be more engaged? Because in many different D&D groups, there is a person looking at their phone. And it's extremely demoralizing. They're not telling you that they don't care, but if you are making a wonderful story, if you are trying to get people wrapped up in it, and you're trying to create a grand, immersive world, and you look over from the table, and you see a person looking at their phone, they're not saying directly that they don't care, but the action speaks much louder than words do. There are many different ways to see this. You could see players talking to one another. They could be making little dice towers because they're so bored. And it's demoralizing. That's why we are trying to figure out how to get our players to be more engaged into our world. And the first thing that you can do, my friends, is that you need to care. Caring yourself is contagious. It's intoxicating. If you look towards someone and they're animated and they're having a great time, they're smiling, they're laughing, and they're really getting into the story and what's happening, then it's very hard to sit on the sidelines and just pull out your phone and start looking at it. Instead, you start to lower that phone and get drawn in. So the first step in order for your players to be engaged is that you need to be engaging yourself. You need to have fun with the story, be engaged with what's going on, and not constantly look forward ahead to what could happen or be distracted by anything else. You are here for the game. You are here to be immersed, just like the players are. And if you do so, the engagement will ooze out from you and contaminate the players. But it can't all be on you. After all, you're trying to make sure that the players are engaged. So there are three main ways to make them care after, of course, you care yourself. The first is through story. The second is through NPCs. And the third is through personal attachment. You could have a grand narrative in your story about how big bad evil Zilla is going to take over the world and the players need to go and stop them by finding the MacGuffin and yada yada yada, whatever. It could be a good story, it could be boring such as that, but the quality of the story doesn't matter here. What matters is your players' engagement in said story. In order to make them engaged, you need to make the story involve them somehow. It has to be personal. It has to be attached to them. A great way of doing this is involving the players' backstories into the actual story. If your player is a paladin and they recovered their family heirloom sword from the well that their parents threw in, and you pull it out trying to find your parents, you could have that player's parents be locked up in a dungeon. Make the story personal. Make it so that that big bad evil guy has personally affected you and your family, and you want to get revenge on them. You might have it where a player's village was burned down. Well, obviously, that big bad evil guy should be behind it, or at least have some connections to it, to broaden the scope of it. The story should be personal and attached to the players at some point. You need to make that happen sooner rather than later. Make it so that they are invested in what happens. The second way of doing so is by creating interesting NPCs. Now, we have a whole nother episode on how to create great NPCs, but what we're talking about here is giving NPCs that your players care about. You can't just give them NPCs that are great shopkeepers or great informants. You need to give them some NPCs that have some life to the characters. You could make sure that they have some children or orphans that they take care of. Maybe there's a shopkeeper that they really enjoy. Someone who actually interacts with them on a personal level. When there's downtime, they choose to hang out with this NPC or want to. They're not always able to, but whenever they can, it's a treat. If this NPC is part of your story, then your players will be engaged since they know that you can make NPCs like this. They know there are more NPCs like this out there. And if they can find more diamonds and gems, they'll have even more fun in the game. And they'll be more attached and engaged to your world. The third and final point is to make something personal attached to your players. Now, this is a bit more wonky, since we've already talked about personal backstories, having personal friends with NPCs, but we're talking about objects, titles, or something more material to get your players invested. Let's say, for example, that your players are fighting a big bad evil guy who wants to conquer a land, whatever. But the players have a manor there. They actually own land. They're lords or duchesses or whatever of this plot of land and have peasantry there. Now, it's personal, because that villain is trying to take over their land, and that's not going to happen. This also makes it so that if your players have a home, they are less likely to run rampantly, going from one town to another, meandering and murdering and pillaging as they go along, because there's no consequences, nothing's tying them down. If you give them something to care about, titles, lands, houses, any possession that can be taken away, then that makes them more invested. But by all means, do not just use this as a method to harm the players. Don't just take those possessions away or threaten them constantly, because if they're too much of a burden, they're not worth the cost. And your players will see that very quickly. Just make it so that that's in the back of their mind. They're not threatened directly, but they want to be engaged in order to make sure all their hard work does not turn to ashes. Now, with you being more engaged, caring about the story, infecting your players with that, and giving them reasons to care, some players might not be as engaged still as you'd wish. Some players might still be kind of sitting in the corner and twiddling their thumbs, not making eye contact, and not engaged as much as you would wish. For these players, something good to do is to show them that it's okay to be engaged. It's okay to speak up. Have an NPC talk to them when it makes sense. When they're going and trying to sell merchandise and the other players are negotiating with the merchant, have the merchant talk to this player. Have the merchant say, "Hey you, lass over there, it seems that you're very quiet. Obviously you're quiet because you need a pair, since that'll help make sure that you are functioning correctly." Yeah, and you can even make it just pure BS, just ooze out that way. But the player will be forced to engage and respond and have fun. And try to make fun encounters for them so that they can enjoy themselves a little bit more. Teach them that it's okay to express themselves and be engaged, because some players are just shy. And that's alright, because not everyone is going to be as engaged as you wish. Not everyone is going to be hanging on the next thread of what could happen. No. Everyone is different and unique in their own way. You can nudge and prod players, you can give them reasons, you can be infectious in how engaging you are yourself. But some players do prefer to sit back and be on the sidelines. They do prefer to be a little bit more quiet. And that's okay. Some players can be that way. You don't need to constantly poke and prod them in order to get them to roleplay or to be light in the story. They just want to sit back and watch what others do. And if you've given them the options to roleplay, if you've given them enough reason to be engaged, and you have also created circumstances that let them shine, or at least let them talk, then that's fine. Some players do like to sit back, and that's something we need to be okay with as DMs. Now, it is unfortunate that we can't force everyone to have glued open eyeballs and pay attention and be as engaged as we wish, but with these tips and tricks, I am quite sure that you will be able to make your players more engaged, or at least understand where they're coming from. However, don't let me be the only one to leave some thoughts on this topic. Leave a comment down in the comment section down below telling me how you get your players to be engaged. Do you use whips and cattle prods? I hope not. But if you do and that works out, hey, leave it in the comment section down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe and share this video so that we can reach more people, and ding that notification bell so that you can stay informed on all the tips and tricks about Dungeons & Dragons. Lastly, always remember, your players love and appreciate you. This has been Wizo, and keep rolling, my friends. Keep rolling.